Okay, you're in Microsoft Excel and you want to connect workbooks. So I've got my first workbook open and I'm going to create a new workbook. And I'm going to split the screen so I can see both workbooks on the screen at the same time. To do that, I can go to View, Arrange All, and then click on OK. So here's my new workbook, and here's the workbook I want to link to. Now there's various ways we could do this. I could actually start by clicking into cell A1 in my new workbook, type an equal sign, click once into the workbook I want to connect to, and then select the cells that I want to create a connection to in this other workbook. So I've included the data plus an extra row and column. Now if I press enter, you can see that it has connected to this data. And for example, if I changed this value here to 50,000, it would automatically update this version of the data. Now we've got a few issues here. We don't have any formatting that's carried over. And also we have these zero values. Now I'll show you how to hide these zero values. If you go to File, Options, Advanced, scroll down. Go to Display Options for this workbook, and you'll see an option here, Show a zero in cells that have zero values. That's ticked by default, so we'll untick it. Click on OK. Now to apply the right format, that's easy to do. I'm just going to select those cells, Home, Number, and I'm going to apply this accounting format. So if I add December to my original workbook, you can see it automatically updates the data in this new workbook. And I could type in a value for South. If I added another region, so Northwest, it would do the same thing for the new column. And equally, I could add a value for that region. Just need to widen this column to show that value. Now the problem would come if in my original workbook I added an additional column, so for a new region, Southwest, and this new workbook is not going to pick up that new column because the connection is only to columns A through to F. Now I could easily resolve that by changing my formula up here. You can see the range of cells it refers to, so I could change the F to a G up there, press enter, and it brings in that new heading. Now we can get around this problem of new rows and new columns by using tables. So in my original workbook, I'm going to go to this second sheet and I'm going to put this data in a table. Now to do that, you just click somewhere in the data and use the shortcut key Control-T. You get this dialog box and all you need to do is click on OK. And then you need to give the table a name. So you'll see a table name box up here. So I'm going to call this monthly underscore sales. Can't have a space in a table name. So if I create a new sheet over here, what I'm going to do is link to the table. So equals, then I'm going to click into this workbook and then I'm going to select the whole table. And you'll see here that it refers to the name of the table and then in square brackets #all. Now it's not going to copy the formatting over, so we still need to format our cells. But if I add a new month, even though it's not part of the original table, you can see that my new workbook picks up that new month. And the same over here, Northwest. And I could go on filling in column headings right across the sheet if I wanted to. Now this works because the table automatically expands horizontally and vertically. So that may be a better way of linking to a data set in another workbook. Now I'll just go back to this original sheet. I'm going to delete the new column and the new row I created. And we're going to try a different method of making a connection between two workbooks. Now to use this method, let me just expand this window. What we do is we go to Data and then to Existing Connections. Now, if you were connecting to a table, you could go to the Tables tab in this dialog box and it will list all the tables in any open workbooks. So for example, I can see the monthly sales table that we just created there. So I could click on open. And then it'll ask me where I want to import the data. So I'm just going to say in A1. And you can see it brings in that data. Now I'll just close that down. I won't save anything. And what I'm going to do is create a new workbook, but close down the original workbook. So I'll close this down. And I'm going to look at those data connections again. If I go to tables now, you can see there are no tables found because that other workbook is now closed. So if that's the case, what you can do is go to Browse for More, and then browse for the file that contains the data you want to connect to. So there's my file. Click on Open. So what it does is list any sheets that contain data and any tables in the workbook. So we can connect either to a sheet or a table. Now let's try it with a sheet first of all. So it's brought through that data in the sheet. Now I'm going to open that workbook again. And I'm going to split the screen. And I'm connected to this data here. So if I type in Northwest here, you'll notice that it doesn't update this connected version of the data. Now what we can do, go to Queries and Connections. And that'll show you any connections that you have in this workbook. So there's my monthly sales connection. I can right click on it and go to Properties. And I can set it to refresh every X number of minutes. I can also set it to refresh data when opening the file. So I'll tick that, and I'll say I want it to refresh every 1 minute. So it's actually brought through the data on that occasion. But let's split the screen again. And what I'll do is I'll add December down here. And we'll see if it pulls through that new row automatically for us. Now we will have to wait for a while, but let's see if it does it. So you can see it's pulled through that new row. Now, one thing to note is that this data isn't in a table, but it's still brought through the extra column and the extra row. That's because the connection is to the whole sheet. So we can either connect to a whole sheet or a whole table, but the connection will be dynamic whichever method we use. Now, if you don't want to wait for an update, so for example, if I typed in a value here and you didn't want to wait for a minute for the connection to update, what you can do is refresh automatically. So if I go to the Data tab, you'll see that there is a refresh button here. So I can either refresh all, which will bring through the data, or I could just refresh. Okay, that's all I wanted to cover in this particular video. Hopefully that's useful. If it is, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you next video.